You're going to be faced with adversities throughout your life. This was a pretty big one.
Brittany Griner has finally decided to confront Stephen A. Smith this time over the long-running controversy surrounding her gender. For years, online rumors have claimed she's actually a man.
Brittany Griner is, in fact, a man.
Now, Stephen has added fuel to the fire, and he isn't backing down.
Brittany Griner was in a Russian prison.
I have the full details of the whole thing. Let us get into it. The Stephen A. Smith explosion that rocked the basketball world. Stephen A. Smith somehow finds his way into almost every controversy, and now he's landed in the middle of Brittany Griner's. And let's just say she's not having it. The drama traces back to Griner's harrowing detention in Russia in 2022, but its roots run far deeper into a long and toxic history of gender-based harassment that has followed the 6'9" WNBA superstar throughout her career. Long before fake DNA test claims began circulating, Griner had already been the target of relentless speculation about her gender identity. Her towering height, deep voice, and masculine features sparked years of scrutiny, fueled by outdated and narrow ideas about what femininity in women's sports should look like. The persistent attacks on Griner's gender identity had created a fertile ground for even more elaborate conspiracy theories. Anonymous social media users regularly questioned whether she was truly female, pointing to her height, wingspan, shoe size, and voice as evidence that she might be a man.
The voice is that's what kind of sells it.
These attacks weren't just random harassment. They represented a coordinated campaign to delegitimize one of women's basketball's most dominant players.
Good morning, guys. So a couple of months ago, I posted a video about Brittany Griner, who is a WNBA player who was so disenchanted with oppression, discrimination, and injustices in the United States that she decided to move to Russia to play for a Russian basketball team. I didn't really do my research on who exactly Brittany Griner is. It wasn't until yesterday that I saw a video of her speak, and it just hit me. I was like, wait, that's not a woman. That's not a female. That's not even a trans person. That is a man. Like, that's a legit biological man.
The gender-based attacks against Griner had been documented for years by major publications, revealing the depth and persistence of this harassment campaign. As Elle magazine reported in 2013, social media was filled with ugly invective against her, including comments like, "Brittany Griner is now the first man to play in the WNBA," and "Brittany Griner suspended for first 3 games next season after testing positive for a P." These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a sustained campaign of harassment that questioned her very identity as a woman. The conspiracy theories gained new momentum when YouTube content creators began producing elaborate videos questioning Griner's gender. These videos analyzed everything from her voice patterns to her physical build, creating pseudo-scientific narratives that suggested she was either transgender or had been assigned male at birth. The content. Creators presented themselves as investigative journalists uncovering hidden truths, when in reality, they were perpetuating harmful misinformation about a vulnerable athlete.
Brittany Griner, who was imprisoned in Russia in a man's prison, which I had no idea about, and I think that leads us into our next story. Amy, take us away.
Yeah, so I would never have thought that I would be on here talking about a sports story, okay? Anybody at Valuetainment who knows me knows that I am very much not adept when it comes to the world of sports. But we do have a very interesting intersection right now with Pride Month going on. And so I thought I would bring this story to you guys. There has been widespread speculation for a while now, but it's really kind of come to a head on Twitter over the last couple of days that Brittany Griner, the WNBA's Brittany Griner, is in fact a man.
Griner herself had been forced to address these attacks directly in interviews, showing remarkable resilience in the face of persistent questioning about her gender. In a 2015 ESPN magazine interview where she posed for the body issue, she stated, "I'm sure people are going to have a lot of critical things to say about these photos. Yo, she's a man, but hey, that's my body, and I look the way I look. People are either going to accept me for who I am or they're not." The personal toll of these attacks was evident in Griner's recounting of childhood experiences that had shaped her understanding of how society viewed her appearance. She had been bullied as a child due to her size and deep voice, including incidents where peers touched her to confirm her flat chest in 6th or 7th grade. Even as an adult, she faced humiliating situations, such as being kicked out of women's restrooms in China and the United States by people who thought she was a man.
You can clearly see here
Nothing there.
His bare chest is completely exposed. Now, there's a couple of different things here. First things first is like there's a lot of AI detections in these things. Like you can't post anything like that on social media without it being detected. And so, I mean, whatever AI detection, glanced over this thing, did not flag it. Like they clearly was like, okay, this is just a man with their chest exposed. Okay, number two, you could possibly speculate, okay, is Brittany trans then? What's the situation here? But as we can see, this is the picture, right, Kelly? There aren't any top surgery scars.
The conspiracy theories reached new heights of sophistication during her Russian detention, when elaborate narratives began circulating about alleged evidence of her biological sex. Social media users dissected old photos and videos, claiming to have found proof that she was actually male. One particularly viral conspiracy theory suggested that she had been forced to live as a female from childhood due to her mother's alleged mental illness, creating an entire fictional backstory to explain her success in women's basketball. These conspiracy theories weren't just harmless speculation. They had real-world consequences for Griner's safety and well-being. The persistent questioning of her gender identity contributed to harassment, both online and in person, forcing her to constantly defend her very existence as a woman. When Griner was detained in Russia in 2022, this existing environment of gender-based harassment provided fertile ground for even more elaborate misinformation campaigns. Social media platforms were suddenly flooded with what appeared to be legitimate news reports claiming that Russian officials had ordered Griner to take a DNA test to determine whether she should be placed in a male or female prison. The story spread like wildfire across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, with thousands of users sharing what looked like an authentic CNN screenshot reporting this alleged development. The fabricated image appeared incredibly sophisticated, featuring CNN's recognizable branding and professional layout. It claimed that Russian authorities had demanded genetic testing to determine Griner's biological sex, feeding into existing narratives about her physical appearance and gender identity. The post went viral within hours, shared by thousands of users who believed they were spreading legitimate news about a developing international incident. The DNA hoax had served multiple purposes for those who created and spread it. First, it had conditioned audiences to accept sensational claims about Griner without proper verification. Second, it had demonstrated how easily even sophisticated social media users could be manipulated when the misinformation confirmed their existing biases about gender and sexuality. Third, it had shown that false stories about Griner could generate massive engagement and spread far beyond their original sources. Most crucially, it had proven that even when thoroughly debunked, these false narratives could maintain a life of their own in certain corners of the internet. But here's where this story takes a sinister turn that would later influence Stephen A. Smith's controversial commentary. The date was June 6, 2025, and Stephen A. Smith was about to make the most catastrophic error of his illustrious career. Armed with his recent $100 million 5-year contract with ESPN, Smith had never been more influential or more trusted by his massive audience. What happened next would shatter that trust and expose the dangerous vulnerabilities in our sports media ecosystem. The setting was the Valuetainment podcast, hosted by Patrick Bet-David, a platform known for its provocative discussions and willingness to tackle controversial topics. Smith appeared confident and ready to deliver his trademark passionate commentary, completely unaware that he was about to become the victim of one of the most sophisticated misinformation operations in sports media history, one that built directly upon the foundation of gender-based harassment that had been laid over years of attacks on Griner's identity.
First things first. Respectfully, Brittany Griner was in a Russian prison. You would think that somebody who is now free, back in America, on home soil, would not have too much to complain about, especially something like this.
According to Smith, Griner had no right to complain about the hate she's receiving, dismissing it as just fan behavior. Then he doubled down, bringing up the U.S. government's controversial prisoner swap and implying that she should simply be grateful.
Clearly, she's not remembering who they let out to get her back
The
on
Merchant
American
of
soil.
Death.
The Merchant of Death, an arms dealer that wanted to kill American citizens, according to the reports. That's who they let out. For her. You would think that you would be smiling, you would be ecstatic, you would be happy. And something like this wouldn't faze you at all.
It was like throwing gasoline on a fire that had never really gone out. Here was someone who had endured a Russian prison and whose release cost the U.S. one of the most dangerous arms dealers on the planet, now being painted as ungrateful for daring to call out harassment. But Smith's comments weren't just another quote. They were the result of years of targeted misinformation. Conspiracy theories about Griner's gender had been so widespread and relentless, they managed to warp the thinking of even a seasoned media professional. The smear campaign had worked. It had created a world where questioning Griner's very humanity felt normal, and where denying her the right to speak out felt justified. The reaction to Smith's comments was immediate and intense. Social media platforms erupted with responses ranging from enthusiastic support to sharp criticism. For many, Smith had articulated frustrations they had been feeling, but hadn't been able to express with such clarity and passion. For others, his comments represented an unfair attack on someone who had already suffered enough. For Brittany Griner, watching this unfold must have felt like being trapped in a nightmare. Here was one of the most powerful voices in sports media, spreading completely false information about her character, based on words she had never spoken, thoughts she had never expressed, and attitudes she had never displayed.
We're not going to stop fighting. We're not going to stop bringing awareness to everyone that's left behind right now. Coming back from basically, doing nothing, not having any gym or anything to be at. Getting back into it was hard.
The real Brittany Griner, as revealed in her own words, was someone committed to fighting for others, someone who understood hardship and was working to overcome it. The contrast with the fictional character created by the fake quote couldn't have been more stark. Apart from her public clash with Stephen A. Smith, Brittany Griner has often found herself at the center of conflicts and controversies, both on and off the court. Let's get into the moments that sparked headlines, divided fans, and revealed the tensions hiding beneath the surface. The WNBA Civil War, when legends clash behind the scenes. The world of professional women's basketball erupted into chaos as internal tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface for years finally exploded into public view, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of the league that Brittany Griner and her contemporaries had worked so hard to build. But to understand how we arrived at this explosive moment of league-wide conflict, we need to examine the complex web of relationships, rivalries, and resentments that had been building within the WNBA for years before Caitlin Clark ever stepped foot on a professional court.
Caitlin Clark and
I'm a fan.
Angel Reese, right?
Yeah.
They're going back and
I'm a
forth.
fan of both.
And Jamil Hill says by the time Angel Reese is done, she's going to be the Michael Jordan of WNBA.
She said about Angel Reese?
She said Angel Reese, by the time she retires.
The declaration from Jamil Hill that Angel Reese would become the Michael Jordan of the WNBA sent shockwaves through the basketball community, igniting debates that went far beyond simple athletic comparisons. This wasn't just about basketball prowess or statistical achievements. It was a statement that challenged the established hierarchy of the league and threatened to overshadow the arrival of the most polarizing rookie in WNBA history, Caitlin Clark. Brittany Griner's own career had been marked by numerous controversies long before her detention in Russia. Her 2015 domestic violence incident with Glory Johnson had already established her as a polarizing figure within women's basketball circles. The incident, which resulted in arrests for both players and eventual WNBA suspensions, painted a picture of someone whose personal life was as tumultuous as her professional career was dominant. Even during her college years, Griner had shown a propensity for controversial moments. Her 2010 punch of an opponent during a game at Baylor, which resulted in a broken nose and immediate ejection, foreshadowed the kind of intense scrutiny that would follow her throughout her career. These weren't isolated incidents of poor judgment. They were part of a pattern that would make her relationships with other players increasingly complex and fraught. Griner's 2020 decision to protest the national anthem had already created significant tension within the league, dividing players along political and cultural lines. While some supported her stance on social justice issues, others felt her approach was unnecessarily divisive and potentially harmful to the league's broader appeal and marketing efforts. The situation became even more complex with the arrival of Caitlin Clark, whose immediate impact on WNBA viewership and attendance created an uncomfortable reality for veteran players who had been laboring in relative obscurity for years. Clark's presence was literally changing the economics of the league, with ticket prices and television ratings reaching unprecedented levels whenever she took the court. The tension reached a boiling point during games between Clark's Indiana Fever and teams featuring other prominent players. The viral incident on May 24, 2025, when Griner was allegedly captured on video making derogatory comments about Clark after fouling out represented the moment when private resentments exploded into public view.
You said you didn't remember what you said during that viral moment after you fouled out against the Indiana Fever. A lot of people believe what you said was effing white girl or effing white girls. Is it possible that's what you said?
No, would never say that. Like, there's no place for that in our league. Wouldn't say that.
Griner's firm denial of making racial comments provided a glimpse into the pressure and scrutiny that players were facing as every interaction became subject to viral dissection and public judgment. But her statement also revealed the reality that tensions between players had reached a level where such accusations seemed plausible to many observers. The conflict wasn't limited to individual personalities. It reflected deeper structural issues within the WNBA that had been building for years. Players had long complained about the pay disparity that forced many of them to play overseas during the offseason, creating a situation where international commitments often took precedence over league loyalty and team chemistry. The broader cultural and political dimensions of these conflicts couldn't be ignored. Griner's identity as a black lesbian athlete had made her a target for political criticism and cultural warfare that extended far beyond basketball. Her detention in Russia and subsequent release had politicized her very existence, making every action subject to scrutiny through multiple lenses of interpretation. The intersection of race, sexuality, politics, and athletic performance created a toxic environment where players couldn't simply focus on basketball. Every interaction, every comment, every facial expression became subject to viral analysis and cultural interpretation, making genuine relationships and team chemistry increasingly difficult to maintain. The cumulative effect of all these factors, economic pressures, cultural tensions, political divisions, media scrutiny, and competitive rivalries created an environment within the WNBA that was increasingly toxic and unsustainable. Players were being forced to navigate not just athletic competition, but complex webs of cultural and political expectations that had little to do with basketball itself. Let's now have a look. How the web of controversies, conflicts, and cultural warfare surrounding players like Brittany Griner has fundamentally poisoned the actual game of basketball itself. How internal conflicts are destroying basketball. The transformation of professional women's basketball from sport to cultural battlefield reached its apex during the 2025 season, when the arrival of Caitlin Clark and the ongoing controversies surrounding established stars like Griner created an atmosphere so charged with tension that the actual games became almost unwatchable for those seeking pure athletic competition.
So then, outside of that, RG3 comes out and says, man, Caitlin Clark is a superstar and she's, bigger than life and all this stuff. Ryan Clark, out of nowhere, who's a commentator, out of nowhere comes out and he says, well, what does RG3 know anything about this? RG3, who was a former quarterback, a great rookie quarterback.
The insidious nature of how external commentary and media coverage was poisoning internal relationships became clear when even former NFL players were being drawn into WNBA controversies based on their personal relationships and family dynamics. The suggestion that RG3's marriage to a white woman somehow disqualified him from commenting on WNBA racial dynamics revealed the toxic environment that players were being forced to navigate daily. But perhaps the most devastating impact of these ongoing controversies was how they were affecting the actual quality of play on the court. Brittany Griner's own admission about the psychological toll of constant scrutiny provided a window into how external pressures were compromising athletic performance across the league.
Still a process. Just the little things. Doing a plank, it was so simple before and couldn't even stay up very long, and just a regular plank when I first came back.
The physical manifestation of psychological stress was evident in Griner's description of her struggle to return to basic athletic fundamentals. When a player of her caliber couldn't maintain a simple plank position due to the accumulated stress of public scrutiny and personal trauma, it became clear that the controversies were having real, measurable impacts on athletic performance. The ripple effects extended far beyond individual players to affect team chemistry, game strategy, and the overall competitiveness of the league. The viral incident between Griner and Caitlin Clark wasn't just about two players having a heated moment. It was symptomatic of a league where every interaction had become loaded with cultural and political significance. The economic data surrounding Caitlin Clark's impact on the league painted a stark picture of how individual controversies and conflicts were affecting the broader WNBA ecosystem. When ticket prices for games dropped by more than 70% simply because Clark was injured, it became clear that the league's financial stability was becoming dangerously dependent on individual individual personalities rather than the sport itself. This economic volatility created additional pressure on players to maintain public personas and avoid controversies that might damage the league's newfound financial momentum. But the irony was crushing. The more players were forced to focus on their public image and cultural impact, the less they could focus on the basketball skills and team chemistry that had originally made them worth watching. The psychological toll on younger players entering this toxic environment was particularly concerning. Rookies like Caitlin Clark found themselves immediately thrust into cultural and political battles that had nothing to do with their basketball abilities or professional aspirations. When a rookie's comments about privilege and race become international news stories, the sport itself becomes secondary to cultural warfare. The impact on game quality became undeniable when analyzing actual performance statistics. Angel Reese's historically poor shooting percentage of 22.7% wasn't just an individual struggle. It represented how external pressures and internal conflicts were affecting fundamental basketball skills across the league. When players are spending mental energy on cultural battles and media management, their athletic performance inevitably suffers. The psychological warfare between players was becoming increasingly sophisticated and destructive. The alleged incident where Griner was accused of making racially charged comments toward Caitlin Clark represented more than just trash talk. It was evidence of how racial and cultural tensions were poisoning the competitive environment. The role of social media in amplifying and distorting every interaction had reached crisis levels. The viral nature of the Griner-Clark incident demonstrated how split-second moments of competition were being weaponized for cultural and political purposes, making genuine competitive intensity virtually impossible to maintain. The impact on coaching strategies and team building was becoming evident as coaches were forced to consider not just basketball skills and team chemistry, but the cultural and political implications of their roster decisions. The pressure to balance competitive success with cultural representation was compromising the fundamental principle that the best players should play regardless of their personal backgrounds or political beliefs. The long-term consequences for player development were particularly troubling. Young athletes entering the WNBA were learning that success required not just basketball excellence, but sophisticated navigation of cultural and political minefields. This was creating a generation of players who were more focused on media management than skill development. The question that remains is whether women's professional basketball can find its way back to being about basketball itself, or whether it will continue to be consumed by the cultural and political battles that have already done so much damage to the sport and its athletes. Only time will tell if the game can survive the toxic environment that has been created around it. What are your thoughts on the Brittany Griner DNA controversy and Stephen A. Smith's involvement in it? Do you think the backlash was justified, or is there more to the story? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to click on the cards on screen for more deep dives like this.